Hello, everyone. Welcome to our talk titled Get Off the SaaS Roller Coaster: How to Stop Burning Cash, Careers, and Companies. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to dig into what's been going on in the world of SaaS and hopefully give some tools that we believe can help navigate this roller coaster. Um, Before we get started here, let's do a quick round of intros. I'm Kyle Brill. I'm the head of engineering at Crafted. I have been in and around the SaaS and startup ecosystem in Denver and Silicon Valley since about 2013. I have been on and off the roller coaster with everyone consulting and building products and just generally navigating life as as a software developer and then an engineering leader. And I will give it over to Ted to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ted. I'm senior software engineer here at Crafted. I've been here for about 2.5 years now, and I just love building software that um, you know helps people solve problems. Charlotte.
Hi everyone, I am Charlotte. I'm a product designer at Crafted. Been in that consultancy space for close to 4 years now. Prior to that, I was freelancing. So I've seen everything from seed funded startups up to giant enterprise companies. I love just making a difference in people's lives, one design at a time.
Nice. Thank you, team. Okay, some housekeeping before we get started. Submit questions as we go using the Q&A functionality. We'll answer questions at the end. Unless you have a very pressing question, you can raise your hand and we're happy to discuss live, and we will share a recording of the webinar and a follow-up email. Our agenda for today: what is the roller coaster? Roller coasters seem fun. Why does this matter? This will help us establish the context in part one. And then in part two, we will introduce the craft framework, talk about how the framework works, and then do some Q&A. So let's dive into the business context. Um, Before we get to the next slide, I just want to share where the source of this data is from. It comes from Carta. They are an authoritative data set managing thousands of company equity for thousands of companies. There are tons of assets on the platform. And if you want to follow along for more, I really enjoy the content put out by their head of insights, Peter Walker, and his team. They have very, very interesting anonymized data about startups in general. So let's look at this graph here. It looks a lot like a roller coaster to me. I'm not sure about you, but as you can see here, funding started at an interesting level in 2018, progressed relatively normally, and then rose and fell quickly. And I'm going to talk to you about my journey here on this roller coaster. So in 2019, I joined a company called Twilio. They just performed an acquisition of a company called SendGrid. So I was working downtown in Denver at that office. This was shortly after I was married. I was flown out, did the onboarding. If you ever have a chance to do a fun Valley onboarding, I highly recommend it. It was very interesting to kind of dive into that world. Here, there was a very interesting thing that happened called the start of a global pandemic. This was COVID-19 in early 2020. This is interesting because everyone left physical spaces. They went online, and Twilio was a cloud communications provider. And interestingly, this graph right here of startup funding oddly kind of mirrors their stock price, which hit an all-time high here. It was very interesting times at Twilio. We were building and hiring fast. Things were looking good, but I was also looking around at some of my peers in the startup ecosystem that were doing really well and joining very interesting, innovative companies that were starting and getting funded with this glut of cash that started entering the market in late 2020. Right here, I decided to join a startup that had a headcount of about 30. We doubled that headcount throughout the course of 2022. It was a very interesting time to be working in insurance tech, working for a company that was fully remote based out of Canada. life was generally very good. I was learning a lot, managing people, felt great about hiring a ton of people, but I did not realize that I was on the downward slope of a roller coaster. And right here, with some headwinds in the business, I was laid off along with 50% of the company. And that is my journey on the SaaS roller coaster in 3 short years there. So maybe the good news for me, the unfortunate news for the industry is that I was not alone. This is a graph of headcount growth sputtering in 2023, and we can see that there is sustained headcount reduction across all of SaaS. And what's interesting about this is that very little else about SaaS companies changed. We still had ambitious goals. We had a lot to build and deliver. There were, a lot of things going on with bringing new companies and customer and markets and customers and growth and everything. But now we are constrained. There are fewer people in the SaaS ecosystem, and we still have to figure out how to hit some of those ambitious goals. But why? Why is this layoff kind of trend happening, or this maybe lack of backfill as people are retreating from SaaS happening? And I think we can boil it down to a big change in the industry that started happening on that downward funding trajectory. And that is the concept of default, alive, or dead. This was started by Paul Graham. His essay is linked here, and this is a binary thing. You are either alive or you are dead. Default alive means you're not profitable today. You're projected to become profitable before your cash is gone based on revenue growth and expenses. This means that you will be able to become profitable and that your business is healthy. If you are default dead, you are on the other side of that binary status. And with the reduction in funding, we are seeing companies moving from a posture where maybe they could default dead, they could reasonably believe that they could go out into the market, get cash to basically capture a growth trend or try to pivot the business. And now we're seeing a lot more companies wanting to default alive with the limited resources and the decrease in funding kind of on the end of that roller coaster ride. So why does all this business context matter for product development teams? I started alluding to this. We have ambitious goals. We are an airplane. We're trying to land on this runway, but it is very much a fixed, constrained runway. This is not the middle of Nebraska with cornfields that we can plow and extend with funding. There is a lot of big old ocean that is hard to move on either side of this, and yet we still need to figure out how to land this plane, how to build and grow our companies and have a great impact out in our customers. And that's going to be what the rest of this talk is dedicated to. So I will now turn it over to Charlotte to introduce us to a new framework.
That framework is the CRAFT framework. Yes, it alludes to our company name. It also stands for Continuous Realignment for Teams as a summary of the concepts that make up this framework. Now, who should use this amazing framework? Not to toot our own horn, we think it's pretty cool. Great news, it is for everyone in SaaS. If you are a leader, if you are a manager, this framework is how your team can meet your deliverables, meet your deadlines, operating on those limited resources. If you are that team, if you are that individual contributor, this is the framework you should use to meet those expectations while avoiding burnout and working within those limited frameworks, that limited runway. So to get an idea of how to use the framework, we're first going to look at what not to do. So this is a map of every product ever. You start with your current product, you are moving towards your future product. The orientation of your movement should be along a business goal. Your business has a goal. Maybe if you're a startup, that is create a product. Your goal is just to get something built and out in the market. You're a huge product, you already have it existing. Maybe your goal is to increase revenue, drive more conversions. A lot of goals, a lot of sizes, but you are orienting yourselves along that path. And obviously goals are very lofty and ideal. So usually we break them down into singular ideas or experiments. These are those iterations we drive towards in incremental value. Once you come up with an experiment, you move forward, you keep it trucking along until you deliver it. What happens here, though, is people are fallible. We are not always perfect. We're not always going to drive directly towards that future product. And a small divergency at the beginning of our experiment can lead to a high divergency by the time we actually release this out to users. This results in a high cost to correct. That used to be easy to correct. Cost was easy. We had money, we had time, we had people. Now we have none of those things. And so, how do we minimize this cost to correct and continue driving towards that future product without creating that gap? That is where the craft framework comes in. There are 4 core components of our craft framework. The first is that business goal destination. You should always be orienting yourself along that business goal. The next is defining your experiments. You should have a set path and you should stay stuck on that path. You shouldn't be chasing every fire that pops up in your company. That's how you just create a bunch of tangled webs. The next is continually realigning. You have your destination, you have your path, making sure your entire team stays on that path and making sure that that continues to be the right path as you move along it. Then lastly, tying this all together, you need to do that efficiently. You can have the most perfect process in the world, but if it is slow, you will always be outpaced by your competitors. So you need to do this quickly and efficiently. So what does this look like on our graphic? Like before, we have our current product. We are moving towards a future product along the direction of that business goal. And in the example I'm going to give, I'm going to say we are a hiking company. Our job is to go on hikes. And the business goal we have been given today is to summit a mountain. And there are a couple different mountains we can choose from, actually. We have one that has really cool waterfalls, but we don't really want to go chasing waterfalls. We have one with amazing meadows, but we unfortunately did meadows last week, so we've got our bases covered there. So we choose the mountain we're going to summit is the one with the best vistas, the best views from the top. Now that we have focused on our specific goal, we start along towards that goal. And much like in product, there is no path on this hike. We're going to have to do a little bit of wayfinding, figure out our way as we go. So this is where that realignment comes in. As we're walking towards the mountain, we want to pause, check in with our team, make sure we are headed in the right direction. We think we are, so we keep moving. We make it a good ways, we're making good progress, but we want to pause and realign again. It seems like we are not quite aligned with that mountain. We're a little off to the left. Team decides, yes, we do need to reorient ourselves. So we pivot and we check in a little sooner this time. We were off this time. We're about halfway through. We want to make sure we are headed the right way. We realize we've overcorrected a little bit. So we're going to split the difference and head back. Once again, we keep moving forward. We make good progress. And we have now reached the point of no return. We are low on water, we are low on time. We know that if we miss the summit today, we're going to have to come back and try it all over again. So we take a long break, we take a rest, we check in with our team, we check in with some other hikers on the path, make sure that we are indeed headed the right direction. We're feeling good about our trajectory, so we keep on forward and we manage to make it to that mountain, see those views, and meet our goal. Tying this back into those 4 pillars, we have our business goal, climb a mountain. We all came prepared as a team to climb this mountain. That is what the business goal does. It orients you. We came with the right supplies. No one was wearing slippers. No one had a stroller. No one was prepared for an overnight trip. We were all aligned and brought the right effort needed. Next is the experiment. We picked a mountain and we stayed focused on that mountain. We didn't zigzag all over, wasting time and energy getting distracted by different options. We had committed to that specific goal and executed it. Next is that realignment. That is checking our map, checking in with our team, making sure everyone is headed together and that we are all headed in the right direction. And then lastly, we all did that efficiently. We were not constantly checking our map. We were not trying to wrangle the team. We were able to make good progress and not just stand there discussing what we might do. And that is how this all ties together into the craft framework. I'm going to hand it over to Ted now to break it down into what that looks like for SaaS companies.
Great. So we have a firm understanding of what the analogy is, but now let's ground it in some business context. So we'll start by addressing what makes a good business goal. And remember that this is the beacon. This is going to be our reference point for why we're going to do any development at all. So the first aspect of a good business goal is that it captures value. Here at Crafted, we like to define value in four ways. One is creating a better, more competitive product. Second is reducing the cost of operation. Third is increasing your market share. Fourth is saving time. Um, when your business goal, creates value or captures value, that ultimately helps your business. This should be the easiest argument that I make all day. The second is that it's measurable. Your business goal needs to be measurable. There's a reason that we hike to the top of the mountain, not the middle of a field. One's much more easily measurable than the other. Um, when your business goal is measurable, you can see how you're progressing towards it and if you're on the right path or not. The last piece is that it answers why. Um, why is a general question, and it forces you to examine it forces you to examine your motivation as to why you're doing the thing that you're doing. This is ultimately what will help your business goals serve as a beacon and inform all of the work that comes after it. Importantly, it shouldn't answer the questions what or how. When you answer those questions with your business goal, you'll find that you are on too narrow of a path, and you're not really, setting a guideline. You're not trusting your team to, do that work. You are kind of dictating down, and that doesn't give your team the flexibility that they need to execute the business goal. Great. So back to our diagram, you have a current product. And what the business goal does is it kind of sets the scope for where you could end up. Inside of that scope are a few different future potential products that you could pursue. So for example, if your business goal was to drive user engagement, these three dots might be implementing dark mode, adding like a Google single sign-on, or implementing badges and awards for users based off their activity. Cool. Each of those ideas that I just listed off are experiments. They are ideas that would help you reach your business goal. This is akin to picking which mountain specifically you want to hike, and ultimately that defines your trail and your destination. So one aspect of a good experiment is that there is a clear hypothesis. In our experiment, it's where we're trying to increase the amount of user engagement. Something writing down, we think that we're going to increase user engagement by implementing a dark mode, a feature that users will love and will endear our product with them. Great. Clear, specific, we know exactly what the experiment's about and why we're doing what we're doing. A good experiment is ultimately tied back to a business goal. It makes sense that we do a business goal first, and after that, we define our experiments. This is so that our experiments are also measurable. They show progress regularly. And it also takes in mind the cost and the benefits. Lastly, a good experiment highlights the path not taken. What this is trying to convey is that you should be able to explain how you're going to go about an experiment, and how you're not going to go about it. So, for example, if you're doing a dark mode version of your product, you would see that there's no active product on the market that would do this for you. So you're going to have to decide to develop this yourself. Ultimately, that comes with costs. And you might also explore why a dark mode as opposed to a high contrast mode or something else like that. You should be able to defend your decision to develop specifically a dark mode develop the dark mode yourself. The last piece of a good experiment is that it has an owner. This is a little bit logistical. They're the person who drives forward the experiment, but they're also the person who is accountable, who is tracking the progress, and ultimately, if the experiment fails, which it can do, we'll pull the plug and save those costs, save the business from accruing further costs into a dead experiment. In our diagram, we know where we are. Let's say that we are going to go forward with the most compelling experiment. We think that it's going to be this dark mode feature. So we can get rid of the other ones and just draw a line straight from the current product to the future potential product. Excuse me. And then we can also just simplify the diagram to go straight from point A to point B. No other deviations. We have our path, we just need to walk it now. Great. So now let's talk about how to walk that path as efficiently as possible. We can do that by continuously realigning. There are a few different ways that you can do that. The first is you can realign with the market. Second is that you can realign with the business. And third is that you can realign with your team. Charlotte's going to talk about how you can go about realigning with the market.
All right, so aligning with the market means aligning outward with your users. First thing that comes to mind there is user research. I know it's a scary term, but I promise there are ways to do it that are both efficient and affordable. First of all, take a look at your existing user base. They are a phenomenally accessible resource. They are already using your app. They definitely want to improve your software, your experience. So they are going to give you that feedback because it'll make their own lives better. And you already have their contact information. They're easy to reach out to. So the only cost you have is reimbursing them for their time. Next, talking to customer support. This one's even more affordable because you already hopefully have a customer support team. If you don't have a team, maybe you're collecting tickets, maybe you have a help box, any of that counts as customer support where you are collecting that user feedback automatically. Often these are going to be the loudest voices, so it is important to filter out what might be outliers, but any patterns that emerge here are definitely priorities. These are common complaints. Clearly, it is driving people to actually reach out about these issues, so that can be really informative in what your market is doing and how you can meet their needs. Lastly, everyone wants to grow their user base. They want to expand their products. So how do you get out and talk to future users? First off, let's use some internal resources. Talk to sales. They are looking at all of those future resources. They are figuring out how to market to them. They know their questions, they know their wants, they know their needs, they know what the product might be missing. And lastly, you can also do some recruiting. This is slightly more cost heavy than the other options, but there are some amazing tools and recruiting services out there that allow you to reach out, specify your customer base, and get some amazing feedback from users not already engaging with your product. Next is competitive analysis. The market is not just your users, it is also the other people in the space. Sometimes they have better ideas than you do. Take a look at your competitors. What are they doing? Can you do that? Can you do that better? That can definitely inform how to build your product in the next direction. Understanding your own strengths, understanding how to differentiate yourself from the market can also be really good to understand, really drive your marketing efforts. And then lastly, what are similar products that you could take inspiration from? Maybe they're not direct competitors, but something that is a similar, a company that does a similar product to you that you can take advice from, take heed from, look at how they are adapting to their market and see if you can adopt similar patterns. Then finally, data analytics. People love talking about them. They're super helpful. This is where your business metrics come into play. There is usually something measurable about your business goal, and this is where you measure it, looking not only at your business goal, but looking at leading indicators, tracking how your experiments are actually impacting that bottom line. This is also where A/B testing comes in. I feel like I've heard this a lot recently. It's one of the most popular forms of testing. By far not the only form of testing, but this is where it would come into play, is aligning with your market. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love talking user testing, so happy to expound on this further. Gonna hand it back to Kyle to talk about the business.
Awesome. So we've aligned out. We have looked at the market, our users. Now we can maybe, for lack of a better term, align up. We can align within our business, the walls that within the walls that we control. What are some tools and techniques we can reach for there to align cross-functionally and think about growing a business? So at Crafted, we think about this. With a great technique established in the lean startup by Eric Ries. And a lot of it does boil down to establishing metrics or data analytics, as Charlotte was talking about. But within the business, the 3 A's are a great tool for establishing metrics that is actionable, accessible, and auditable. This means that the metrics actually you can influence them. They are actionable. They point in a direction. They are accessible, meaning that the entire business has access to them. This is really important for transparency, which is something Crafted believes strongly in. It increases also the ability to collaborate cross-functionally when everybody can see and be motivated by the same metrics, which are actually actionable. And then the last component, which I think is a little underrated, is auditable. It's important that we're not debating the truth of data or the truth of metrics when assessing what direction they're motivating us within the business. They need to be agreed upon, and we need to trust that the data is sound, that we have good systems and processes underlying those, that is surfacing metrics that are telling us that things are good or that things could really be improved. So that's a great way to align within the business. These metrics generally can cut across a lot of different departments to establish company goals, and we love helping teams getting these in place. The other thing we like to do, and this kind of leans into our focus on transparency, collaboration, continuous realignment, with you leveraging communication, is to build publicly. We do this by building proofs of concept. We have done this a few times this year. We had a really interesting build in public initiative where we posted regularly on a blog about building a chatbot. It's very interesting if you want to go check that out on our website. There is also the concept of demonstrating progress. We do this in a few ways. On one project, weekly, we would post a 5-minute just kind of update video demonstrating progress. There are other ways, maybe in agile engineering, to have a regular demo cadence at the end of a sprint or a week, depending on how you're running those ceremonies. But taking things and putting them in front of people for early feedback within the business is a great way to continuously kind of reorient, and demos are a great way to do that on top of proof of concept, which creates that accountability function that you are continuously shipping value to customers. And the last thing is giving stakeholders access to test systems. Thankfully, this is readily available in the cloud. We love building on AWS and GCP. And this allows us to, before we get to production and before we get in front of users, get things in front of sales or support or marketing, whoever else in the business would have great feedback on what we're building and be able to help us kind of realign with those broader initiatives that the metrics are pointing us at. Awesome. I'm now going to turn it over to Ted to talk about our last area of realignment.
Great. So we talked about aligning out, aligning up. Now we're going to talk about aligning inward with your own team. Sorry. There are a few different tools that we use. By all means, this is not an exhaustive list, but the first tool that we use is a task management software. You might recognize this as Jira, Asana, or Linear, just to name a few out of many. But what we do with the task management software is we break down a project into small little chunks of work called tickets. And each ticket allows us to have a detailed assessment of all of the work that needs to get done in that list, as well as any notes and clarifying documentation around it. At Crafted, we like to say that every ticket is a placeholder for a conversation. So when a project requires multiple tickets, we've been on projects with thousands of tickets. Those are thousands of continuous conversations that are all happening asynchronously at this and at the same time. So it's an incredibly powerful tool if it's used correctly. Um, Second is that um, I wanted to highlight conducting a regular team retrospective. Retros can be great because they're specifically about how your team works together. So if there is friction within the team, a retrospective is a great tool for ironing out those processes and making sure that you're working as efficiently as you possibly can. Lastly, you want to create a space and an environment for micro check-ins. Micro check-ins are kind of just 30-second to 5-minute little conversations where you pull your teammates and you ask for a gut check, you ask for help debugging, you ask for clarification, all these all these little things that help you get a better understanding of what work needs to get done and how you're expected to get it done. Um, at Crafted, we sit in balanced teams. Engineers, product designers, and product managers all sit together um, to make sure that everyone's accessible and that whoever on the team has the support that they need to ask for those micro check-ins and just get those little realignments before doing a bunch of work that might have to get corrected in the future. Great. So let's talk about how to continuously realign efficiently. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but now we're going to just review the facts of realignment. First is that realignment takes resources. Two people having a conversation is two people not actively working on a product. So it takes their time, which is some resource, but it also prevents a costly mistake. So it's a little bit of a dichotomy, or it's a little bit of a contradiction where it takes resources to save resources. And ultimately, where you strike that balance is defined by the relationships and trust within that team. Relationships and trust within a team are instrumental in saving and making sure that the team works efficiently. If everyone has those interpersonal relationships, then you are far more likely to have people who are grabbing people and take more likely to take sorry more likely to grab other teammates to get a micro check-in to speak accurately, to share prototypes, and just make sure that um, your team is all about moving forward and that there's that trust within it. Great. Here's Charlotte to talk about the framework in action.
So we've just got done talking a lot of theory, a lot of hypotheticals. How does this work out in the real world? Things are messy, things are complicated. Luckily for you, Crafted has been on a lot of different clients. We have a lot of different experiences outlining exactly why this framework works. So for our first example, this is a very zoomed in example. This whole process took course over the timeline of maybe 2 weeks. Context, we were on an e-commerce client. Their current product was an online store. Their future product was an online store that sold more product. That was their business goal, was to increase conversion rate. So the experiment we came up with was if we make that purchase button on the page bigger, then more people will purchase it because it is easier to find. And this framework was founded in some previous learnings where we noticed that making the button bigger to enter the platform from their third party caused more traffic into this online platform. So we're like, bigger buttons work, let's try it on e-commerce. So we dive into it. And as we dive into it, we're looking at market patterns. We are aligning outward and we're seeing some anti-patterns. We're seeing that all of the e-commerce giants don't really use very large buttons. They're bright, certainly, but they are relatively small, embedded in the page, naturally occur within the user experience. So we're like, we might be on the wrong course here. We're not ready to give up quite yet, though. So we take a little more time. We invest some effort in building a very quick prototype, just a copy of our sales page with a very, very large button. And we do a series of user interviews, again, over the course of maybe a week, so that we can truly align with our market and see if we are headed in the right direction. Turns out we are not headed in the right direction. Within the context of a sales page, people find the larger button aggressive and predatory. So we learned that this experiment is not going to succeed, even if we take it forward, even if we build it and get it out there. All it's going to do is tank our conversion rate. So we decide to cut our losses. We are going to pivot. We're going to take our time, take our mental energy, and go explore alternate experiments that have a better chance of success because we know this one will not bring us to where we need to be. That's one of the benefits of the framework is due to those check-ins, due to that alignment, you are able to utilize those resources efficiently and even stop because sometimes failure is the best option. Now I'm going to kick it over to Ted to zoom out and see what this looks like at a higher level.
Great. So we saw uh, Charlotte take us through an example of this framework over a 2-week span in a single experiment. I'm going to open up the framework and show how it can be used to track a 2-year long experiment, 2-year long engagement that's filled with many little experiments. The reason why we're bringing up this example is that it was filled with realignment, as you might imagine. Um, but we found three different points where we were realigned with each market, the team, and the business um, to show you how these actually might happen in the real world. So for context, our client was in the construction supplies business. They were an expanding lumber yard who wanted to create their digital footprint with us. Their first idea, the idea that they wanted to pursue was to create an email flow where their clients would send in via email blueprints, and they would return with a separate email letting them know how uh, with some sort of analysis done by machine learning and AI um, about their document. So it would spit out how many windows, how many doors, how many rooms, how many or how many square feet of walls there were, what type of walls, does it have a fireplace, all those details about the building. Um, and ultimately, the next step was to get an assessment of what the actual materials required to build that house would be. Exactly how many bottles of caulk, how many screws, 2x4s, you name it. That's what this tool was meant to be. So we got crafting. We went along this path and started building a product that we could put in front of our users. We actually then did exactly that. We put it in front of a group of alpha users, and the feedback that we got was, we do not want this. This is not a tool that's going to help us build houses. Instead, they said they wanted to get rid of the mountains of the binders full of paper in their offices that was inaccessible as they were in the field. They wanted some software to help them build houses more efficiently. So that's what we started to create with the V2. We pivoted and we started to create a project management platform that was specifically tailored to home construction. What the nice part about this is that we could expand out from just our little pocket of an email framework and actually start to leverage some of the data that was, that the enterprise had in its database. Or I should say databases. So we started working with another team that was exposing this data to us so we could use it in our application, sort of a laying down the rail as in front of the train situation. So we, our first few tickets with them did not go terribly well, but there was a little bit of miscommunication. We were unfamiliar with each other. So we did a team check-in. We resolved that um, we needed to be in regular contact. We needed to know what the other person's plans were, coordinate those plans, and have some sort of protocol to follow if either of us changed our plans. So we followed that, and we got into a rhythm with with another team, or I guess the team that joined ours. Um, to build this product. And it was really cool. You could upload documents, share them, manage your team that was building the project, all really cool software. And that's when the business came knocking, and they wanted to make sure that their interests were met as well. They needed to see some real dollars and cents from this huge investment that they'd made in building this product. So we started to build a V3 prototype that would actually start to, or sorry, that would enable people using our software to conveniently buy supplies in this interface. Yeah, all of those aspects of it. And after checking in with the business, we started to follow that path and ultimately delivered a product that we think is pretty fantastic. But um, that's three different alignments that really saved this project and help it be the success that it was. Uh, Here's Kyle to talk about examples that are not crafted.
Nice. Yeah. So we've established the context, introduced the framework, shown it in action in our projects, but are we simply sipping our own champagne? Are we eating our own dog food, as the tech world likes to say? And hopefully, with these three examples, we can convince you that we see this everywhere in tech. So, Amazon, the behemoth that it now is, started off mailing people books. Similarly, Netflix, behemoth that it is, started off mailing people DVDs. And Airbnb started off renting out spare bedrooms during hotel or when hotels were booked up during conferences. These companies have continuously realigned and pivoted. Amazon um, built AWS, which is the cloud platform that Netflix is now built on, that was built and spun out from internal tooling that Amazon needed to build to actually run their e-commerce business of shipping books and supplies around. Very interesting that they brought then that solution to the market and people like Netflix started adopting it. But Netflix did not jump straight into building or into filming and producing and all of the content that it does today. If you remember, along the way, they were licensing content. They did not have their own production studio. This was a way for them to do some of the things we were talking about earlier around running a proof of concept or de-risking an idea. And now they have their own studio because they proved that people would stream content through the cloud and not just want DVDs. Airbnb now allows people to book whole homes all around the world for vacations. It is not just an excess capacity during a busy conference software. And each of these kind of pivots and evolutions of the business required looking at the market, working within the business to go capture that opportunity. And these teams are world renowned for their engineering and product and design efficiency. They've captured that opportunity because of that. So we see all three examples of market, business, and team continuous realignment kind of shown in the evolution of these companies. Okay, let's wrap it up. Let's summarize. There are headwinds in SaaS and the tech world. Funding levels during the pandemic were likely an anomaly. The craft framework will hopefully help along three areas: this continuous realignment we've been talking about. I do love the concept of these entrepreneurial experiments driven by business goals, where you can continuously iterate and ship business value to customers, get feedback early and often, and all of that is about creating fast and efficient learning loops. I do want to acknowledge that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. You've probably heard aspects of things like lean startups or high-performing teams, agile engineering frameworks. All of those do influence and impact the way that we work daily and do kind of fit into this framework. I think a lot of it is about the efficiency, the trust, the holistic aspect of the framework that hopefully drives, unique value into how you're trying to craft your business. The good news through all these headwinds is you control your own journey, and even with limited resources, you can achieve great results. Please reach out to us if you'd like to chat more. If you have questions, we are always happy to discuss on LinkedIn, where we're all pretty active. Thank you for listening. Get crafting, everybody.